Imagine carrying a burning, just visceral grudge.
Oh, yeah, like a really intense one.
Right. But not over a stolen inheritance and not over a bitter divorce or anything like that, but over a single condescending sentence written about a metal sake bottle cap.
Which is just, I mean, it's wild to even think about.
It really is. And imagine holding on to that precise phonetic fury, feeling the exact same heat in your chest for 60 years.
It sounds exhausting, honestly. And to most people, well, it sounds completely irrational.
Totally irrational.
Because a 6 decade grudge over a childhood essay, it just defies every modern psychological framework we have about, letting go, moving on, finding inner peace.
Exactly. But that specific, seemingly irrational grudge is the key that unlocks this massive, incredibly dense stack of personal essays. The ones that you, our listener, shared with us for today's custom deep dive.
Yeah, you really handed us an entire human life on paper here.
We've basically got a psychological blueprint drawn in the messy, contradictory ink of someone who simply refuses to forget anything.
And you attached a really fascinating, highly specific prompt to this archive, too.
We love a specific prompt.
Oh, absolutely. So you wanted us to analyze the author's behaviors and basically answer 3 questions. First, is this author perceived as an eccentric or a weirdo?
A valid question, honestly, after reading these.
For sure. Second, why on earth does he hold on to such intense quirks and decades-long grudges? And third, and I think this is the real paradox here, how do these exact strange traits, this incredibly heavy emotional baggage, translate into an intoxicating charm?
Right, especially charm directed at women and people across massive generational divides.
It is the ultimate diagnostic puzzle.
It really is. Because on paper, if you just isolate his behaviors, he sounds like someone who would be, well, impossible to share a room with.
A total nightmare on paper. Yeah.
Right. But in the reality of these essays, we see a man who is deeply loved, almost revered, really, by the people in his orbit.
He just operates with this bizarre gravitational pull.
He does. So, to crack this code today, we're going to dive straight into the deep end of human memory.
Sounds good.
We're going to examine his outward armor, unpack his weird internal archive of obsessions, and finally see how that exact obsessive nature makes him a master of romance and empathy.
And to set the baseline here, we have to recognize that the author possesses this hyper attentive, almost photographic emotional memory.
Photographic emotional memory, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because he doesn't just recall the facts of a Tuesday in 1971, he recalls the atmospheric pressure of the room.
Wow.
He remembers the specific angle of the sunlight and the exact cocktail of adrenaline and shame he felt in a given moment.
Which is a heavy lens to view the world through. But before we get to the eccentricity of that memory, we really have to look at the physical fortress he built to protect it.
Right, the armor.
Exactly. We have to talk about his armor and the severe visual mismatch between how he presented himself and who he actually was. So let's wind the clock back to his college days in the 1970s.
Oh, yes. The era of his visual rebellion.
Right. And to understand the rebellion, you have to understand the regime. The author grew up under an incredibly strict, overbearing father. His father was a tax official.
And just think about the psychological profile required for that job in mid-century Japan.
Oh man, rigidity, rules, ledger.
Exactly. It's a life defined by zero tolerance for error or any kind of emotional deviation. His father micromanaged his academic life to a terrifying, really suffocating degree.
It sounds awful. A hyper-intellectual environment where affection is like completely conditional upon academic performance.
Right, and where any display of unstructured, purely emotional behavior is viewed as a total liability.
So the minute the author hits college and gets a taste of actual autonomy, he reacts. But he doesn't just start listening to loud music or, staying out late.
No, he goes all the way.
He adopts the most visually aggressive aesthetic possible for that era in Japan. He gets a tightly curled, Yakuza-style punch perm.
And for anyone unfamiliar with the cultural weight of that hairstyle in the 70s, a punch perm isn't just a fashion statement.
It's a threat.
It's absolutely a threat. It is a harsh, extremely tight perm, heavily associated with street-level enforcers and the criminal underworld.
Right, it's a deliberate severing of ties with respectable academic society. You just cannot walk into a white-collar job interview or a high society dinner with a punch perm.
No, it's basically a permanent scowl worn on your scalp.
And he commits to the bit with terrifying dedication, too. He wears dark sunglasses indoors. He walks around in cheap, stiff leather jackets.
And he does this even in the sweltering, oppressive heat of the Japanese summer.
That detail, sweating through a cheap leather jacket in August in Japan.
Right, because it isn't just uncomfortable, it requires an immense amount of physical endurance.
It really does. It's so hot and humid.
So it proves that this costume wasn't about looking cool, it was about projecting a very specific narrative.
He writes that he heavily idolized tough guy actors of the era, specifically Ken Takura. But I have to admit, when I first read this, I initially thought, okay, he's just a nerdy kid trying to overcompensate.
Like he's just dressing up like a gangster.
Yeah, exactly. Just posturing.
It's easy to dismiss it as youthful posturing, but there is a profound psychological logic at play here.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, if we look at what actors like Ken Takura represented in Japanese cinema at that time, they weren't chaotic, evil villains. They were stoic figures of absolute, unwavering resolve.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they adhered to a strict, unspoken moral code, often prioritizing their duty over their own comfort.
Oh, I see. So it's not about being a criminal, it's about being untouchable.
Exactly. For a young man trying to break free from a highly educated, suffocatingly intellectual father, adopting the aesthetic of an uneducated, hardened outlaw is a brilliant defense.
It's a biological billboard.
Right. It communicated two things clearly. I am nothing like my father, and you cannot hurt me. The leather jacket was literal armor designed to keep the intellectual tyranny out.
That makes the heat endurance make total sense. The discomfort was just the price of admission for the boundary he was setting. But here's where the narrative shifts and where we start to see the roots of his charm. Fast forward a few years.
Corporate era.
Yep. The author sheds the leather jacket and the punch perm. He enters the traditional Japanese corporate world, wears the suit and tie, but he maintains that hardened, stoic, internal shell.
Right. To his younger colleagues, he is a stern, unyielding, no-nonsense manager.
The perimeter is still up. The uniform has just changed to meet corporate standards.
Exactly.
Until one specific afternoon, a female coworker who is on maternity leave decides to visit the office.
And she brings her newborn baby with her.
Now, you would expect the stern, unyielding manager to maybe give a polite nod from his desk or offer a gruff congratulations.
Right. That would fit the persona.
But what happens? The author's mask completely disintegrates. The fortress vanishes.
It's amazing.
He practically sprints across the office floor, hovers over this infant, and begins cooing at it with this massive, radiant, completely unguarded smile.
A total cognitive short circuit for everyone watching.
His younger colleagues were absolutely floored. They were in shock. But here is my question, because logically, isn't this just a guy with a fake tough guy routine getting exposed?
That's what you might think, yeah.
Doesn't this just prove his stern manager persona was a sham? Why did this make them like him more?
It's a really natural conclusion to draw, but it misses the mechanics of human attraction and respect.
Okay, how so?
What we are seeing here is the psychological concept of the gap effect, and it is the absolute bedrock of his charisma.
The gap effect?
Right. Charisma very rarely comes from being a static, predictable archetype. It lives in the space, the gap between our baseline expectation of a person and the sudden, surprising reality of their interior world.
So the distance between the expectation of a reprimand and the reality of a smile.
Precisely. Think about how the human brain assesses a threat.
Okay.
When you work under a stern manager, your nervous system is constantly humming at a low level of alert. You perceive them as formidable.
You're on edge.
Exactly. And when that formidable presence suddenly displays pure, unadulterated tenderness towards something entirely helpless, like a newborn, it forces a complete recalculation of their character.
Because it proves he has a choice.
Yes. To those younger colleagues, that unguarded smile didn't prove his toughness was a lie. It proved his toughness wasn't born of sociopathic coldness.
Wow, okay.
It demonstrated that his armor was built to protect a profound capacity for tenderness. He is capable of destroying you, but he chooses to nurture.
The beast who loves the flower.
Exactly. That duality is one of the most intoxicating behavioral profiles in human psychology.
So the gap effect turns his intimidating presence into a huge asset. It makes his kindness feel earned rather than just, a default setting.
Exactly. It gives it weight.
That answers a piece of the puzzle, but it brings us directly to the core of your question, to you listening right now. You asked, is he perceived as a weirdo or an eccentric?
Right, because while the baby story is universally endearing, the source material is filled with behaviors that are, frankly, bizarre.
Very bizarre. So we need to transition from his outward armor to his internal archive. We need to look at the anatomy of his eccentricity.
And the defining feature of this anatomy is that he lacks a psychological delete button.
Which brings us back to the most staggering story in this entire collection, the 60-year grudge. Let's unpack this Sake bottle cap essay because the details here are really crucial to understanding how his brain works.
They really are.
When the author was 7 years old, he had an assignment for a school observation day. This is the classic setup where parents stand in the back of the classroom and watch their kids present.
Right. A really high stakes environment for a child seeking parental approval.
Extremely high stakes, especially with a strict tax official father. The author wrote a joyful, completely innocent little composition about his favorite hobby.
Collecting colorful metal caps from Sake bottles.
Yeah, he loved sorting them, looking at the designs. It was just a normal kid writing about a normal kid thing.
Developmentally appropriate, harmless, and most importantly, it was authentic to his lived experience.
But the father reviewed the draft at home and deemed it intellectually insufficient.
Which is just heartbreaking.
He forced his 7-year-old son to rewrite it over and over, stripping all the natural joy out of it. And then came the killing blow.
The mandated sentence.
The father handed the boy a slip of paper and forced him to end the essay with this highly specific sentence. He made the boy write, "My mother says she doesn't understand what's fun about it, but I guess she just doesn't know it's actually fun."
We really have to analyze the syntax and the tone of that specific sentence.
Yeah, let's get into it.
In Japanese, the phrasing the father forced him to use drips with a very specific, arrogant condescension.
It's awful.
It is the tone an elitist academic would use to dismiss a layperson. It is entirely unnatural, almost grotesque, for a 7-year-old child to use that tone toward their own mother.
And the kid knew it. Even at 7, he felt the toxicity of those words. But he was terrified of his father's wrath, so he wrote it down.
And then the nightmare scenario happens.
Right. The teacher calls on him during observation day. He has to stand up in front of his peers, his teacher, and both of his parents, and read those fake arrogant words out loud as if they originated in his own mind.
Just terrible.
He had to publicly insult his mother using his father's voice.
The level of psychological dissonance that causes in a child is profound.
And he never let it go. The author is in his 60s now, and in his essays, he explicitly states that he still remembers the exact poisonous syllables of that sentence.
He's held a burning, active grudge over a school essay for 6 decades.
Now, my initial reaction to reading this was, come on, man, it's been 60 years, you have to let it go. This is crossing the line into weirdo territory.
Sure, if you view it purely as a grievance about an essay, yes, it seems petty.
Right.
But if we dig into the mechanisms of identity formation, we see why this isn't just a lingering childhood pout. This is a response to profound trauma regarding existential erasure.
Existential erasure. That is a heavy term. Break that down for me.
Think about the primary task of childhood, right? It is to discover and articulate who you are. The father didn't just make him edit a paragraph for grammar.
No, he did way more than that.
The father hijacked the child's authentic voice, erased it, and replaced it with a manufactured, arrogant puppet. He forced the child to act as a ventriloquist dummy in a public forum.
That's a great analogy.
And for someone whose brain archives emotional states with the photographic precision that this author's does, that memory doesn't just fade into the background noise of growing up.
Because it wasn't just an embarrassment, right? It was an identity theft.
Exactly. The grudge isn't about bottle caps. The grudge is an internal psychological alarm system.
Oh, I see.
He keeps that fire burning deliberately to ensure he never ever lets anyone override his identity again. The anger is the perimeter fence protecting his sense of self.
Wow. So the grudge is a load-bearing wall in his psychological architecture. It keeps him vigilant. But the thing is, his obsession isn't limited to trauma. His brain applies this same terrifying level of focus to completely benign, almost trivial things, too.
Oh, yeah. The archive plays no favorites between pain and pleasure. Everything is recorded in high definition.
Let me walk you through a few of these eccentric fixations from his logs because the sheer scale of his memory is wild. Okay, case study number 1. The 35-year manga quest.
This one is unbelievable.
In 1971, when he was 9 years old, he caught exactly 30 seconds of the ending credits of a girl's anime called Wandering Sun on television.
Just 30 seconds.
Just 30 seconds. He heard a melancholic song and saw a brief clip of a tragic heroine. He was so captivated by that fleeting feeling that he went out and bought the manga the show is based on.
But Volume 4 went out of print before he could buy it.
Right. And this is where a normal brain simply drops the thread, you know? You shrug, you get older, you discover new things, and the memory of that 30-second song fades away entirely.
Definitely. I mean, who remembers a commercial or a credit sequence from when they were 9?
Not him, though. He spent 35 years, literally half a human lifetime, passively and actively hunting down that specific, out of print fourth volume in dusty used bookstores across Japan. He did this purely to get closure on a 30-second feeling he experienced when Richard Nixon was the US president. He finally found it in his mid 40s.
This is a spectacular, lifelong manifestation of the Zeigarnik effect.
I've heard of that, but how does it actually work in the brain to sustain a 35-year hunt?
So, the Zeigarnik effect is a cognitive principle that states our brains remember interrupted or incomplete tasks far better than completed ones.
Okay.
Think of your brain's working memory, your cognitive RAM, like a computer. When you finish a task, say replying to an email, your brain closes that application. It frees up the processing power.
Makes sense.
But when a task is interrupted, your brain leaves the application open in the background. It continually pings your consciousness saying, hey, we never finished this.
So while most of us have a system that auto closes old applications after a few months, his brain simply refuses to shut the program down until the final data packet is received.
Precisely. His need for cognitive closure is absolute.
And it gets more intense. Let's look at his naming quirks. He recently became a grandfather. A joyous occasion, right?
You'd think so.
But he aggressively, vehemently refuses to let his new granddaughter call him Gigi. Now, Gigi is the standard, universally accepted Japanese baby talk for grandpa. It's what everyone uses.
Right.
But he won't allow it. Why? Because in the 1970s, he used to watch pro wrestling, and the crowd would hurl the insult, Baba, which sounds like grandma, but was used as a slur at the famous wrestler Giant Baba.
So, an auditory memory from a wrestling match 50 years ago is dictating his family dynamics today.
Yes. His brain permanently linked the phonetic sound of Gigi to that specific visceral humiliation he witnessed in the wrestling ring half a century ago.
That's wild.
He cannot decouple the benign grandparent term from the archived trigger of public mockery. So what does he do? He constructs a completely new reality.
Ow.
He forces his entire family to use the English word grandpa entirely because of a specific lyric in a song by the artist Maro Takahashi that describes a cool, dignified old man.
That is incredible.
He is literally engineering his aging process based on a single song lyric to avoid triggering a 50-year-old wrestling memory.
It is an incredible display of controlling his environment to manage his internal archive.
And we haven't even touched on the shoes or the somatic obsessions.
Oh, right, the shoes.
He went from a guy who wore cheap, functional slip-ons to owning 20 pairs of astronomically expensive, meticulously polished, custom-welted leather shoes.
And what triggered that?
Purely because one time a single department store clerk sincerely complimented the intricate stitching on his welt.
One compliment.
One moment of genuine validation permanently altered his purchasing habits and his aesthetic presentation.
Well, validation's a powerful currency for someone who pays that much attention to detail. And you mentioned a somatic obsession.
Oh, yeah. The 40-year foot massage. This one made me wince.
Sounds painful.
Every single night, for 4 decades, he takes a pointed plastic stick and grinds it into the soles of his feet while taking a bath. He describes it as excruciating, tear-inducing pain.
Why on earth would he do that?
He doesn't do it because it feels good. He does it to diagnose his mibio, which translates roughly to pre-disease or the state just before illness.
Oh, I see.
He uses the extreme pain to conduct a daily audit of his body's internal state. He maps the pain to different organs to see what's failing.
He treats his own nervous system with the same relentless diagnostic scrutiny that he applies to used bookstores and song lyrics.
Exactly. So, bringing all of this together to answer the first part of our listener's prompt,
Yeah.
Is he an eccentric? Is he a weirdo?
Because on paper,
On paper, living with a guy who holds 60-year grudges, spends decades looking for a comic book, bans the word grandpa because of a wrestling match, and tortures his own feet every night, sounds absolutely exhausting.
it does. It sounds like someone who desperately needs an intervention to learn how to let things go.
Yes.
And that reaction is perfectly aligned with how modern society pathologizes personality.
What do you mean?
Well, we live in an era that worships the idea of being frictionless. The wellness industry, self-help books, corporate culture, they all constantly tell us to shed our baggage.
Right. Just let it go is the mantra of the decade.
To smooth out our rough edges, to mediate away our grudges so we can be easily digestible to the people around us.
Name yourself small and easy to deal with.
Exactly. But looking at this author, we have to ask, what if that framework is entirely wrong?
Okay, I'm listening.
This author's quirks aren't a toxic flaw to be medicated away. These intense fixations, these grudges, these shoe collections, they are the inevitable biological byproduct of a mind that takes the human experience so incredibly seriously that it refuses to discard any of it.
Oh, wow.
He isn't generic, he is intensely, unapologetically himself. He is living his life in high definition, uncompressed emotional reality, while the rest of us are constantly compressing our files to save space.
He refuses to compress the file. I love that.
Yeah, exactly.
He experiences the joy of a perfectly stitched shoe and the pain of a stolen voice with the same 4K resolution.
And that high definition living is the exact mechanism that translates this bizarre eccentricity
Yeah.
into intoxicating charm.
Which brings us to the most fascinating part of the listener's prompt. How does this exact strange trait, this inability to forget, translate into romance, particularly with women?
To understand this, we have to look at how he applies his archival memory to interpersonal relationships. We're moving from the anatomy of an eccentric to the romantic archivist. Because when you take that photographic emotional memory and focus it entirely on another human being, the results are cinematic.
Let's examine his romantic blueprint by looking at his first love, the clinic story.
Ah, yes.
This is pure, unadulterated teenage yearning captured in microscopic detail.
It perfectly encapsulates how he monumentalizes the women he loves.
The author is 15 years old. He's a junior high student suffering from some joint inflammation, so he goes to a local clinic for treatment. Working at this clinic is a 17-year-old trainee nurse.
Now, 2 years isn't a massive gap later in life, but at 15 and 17, it is a chasm.
Huge difference.
She's older, she's in a uniform, she is part of the adult working world, and his brain immediately kicks into high gear archiving.
He doesn't just remember that he liked her, he records the telemetry of the memory.
Exactly.
He remembers the specific, acute angle of the late afternoon sun piercing through the clinic window, hitting the edges of her hair, and turning it to spun gold. He literally refers to her as an angel.
Classic romantic archiving.
He remembers the exact antiseptic smell of the clinic lobby. He remembers the desperate, universal teenage urge to seem mature, to the point where he started stealing his father's terrible smelling hair liquid.
Dousing his head in it, just trying to look slightly older for his 10-minute medical appointments.
Right. And we have to acknowledge the socioeconomic tectonic plates shifting beneath this crush, too.
Oh, definitely. She wasn't just 2 years older. She had left the traditional academic path to enter the workforce as a trainee, which usually indicated financial necessity or working class roots.
Meanwhile, he was on an elite academic track. The gap between them was massive.
But his devotion to bridging that gap was absolute. He calculates her exact commuting route.
Yes, and then for 3 years, he waits at a specific train station ticket gate for exactly 10 minutes every single day, just to accidentally on purpose bump into her for a brief hello.
3 years of engineered micro-interactions. The patience of an archivist.
And the climax of this dynamic revolves around the Eichen test. The Eichen is a highly rigorous, prestigious English proficiency exam in Japan. He was terrified to take the level 2 exam because, growing up with his perfectionist father, he was petrified of failure.
Which makes sense.
He confesses this deep insecurity to her at the train station, and she doesn't coddle him. She doesn't give him a generic pep talk. She just looks at him and says, "You lose nothing by failing."
It is a brilliant surgical dismantling of his ego.
It really is.
By telling him he has nothing to lose, she gives him the psychological permission to risk failure without tying his self-worth to the outcome.
It alters his entire academic trajectory. He takes the test, he passes, he moves forward, but then we hit the closure of the relationship.
The breakup.
Fast forward a bit, he's in high school now. She calls him and asks to meet at a coffee shop in Shinjuku. He arrives, probably heart pounding, and she sits across from him and drops the hammer. She announces she is getting married.
Brutal.
He is predictably crushed, but he manages to choke out a question. He asks what the guy is like, and she smiles and says he's someone like Eikichi Yazawa.
Now, this is where the story elevates from a standard teenage breakup into a masterclass in romantic architecture.
Explain that for me.
For context, Eikichi Yazawa was not just a singer. He was the absolute pinnacle of Japanese rock and roll rebellion.
Okay.
He was the epitome of gritty, working class, cool, and most importantly, he was the author's ultimate untouchable idol.
So I have to ask, why is that specific name drop so important? She could have said, he's an accountant or he works in construction. Why specifically invoke his hero?
To understand this, we have to look at the peak end rule.
The peak end rule.
Right. This is a cognitive heuristic in behavioral psychology, popularized by Daniel Kahneman. The peak end rule dictates that human beings do not judge an experience based on a comprehensive average of every minute.
So we don't average it out.
No. Instead, we judge the entire experience based on two things: how we felt at its most intense emotional peak and how the experience ended.
Okay, that makes sense.
Think of a 2-week vacation. If the weather is mediocre for 13 days, but on the final day you see the most breathtaking sunset of your life while drinking champagne, your brain will file the entire trip away as amazing.
The ending overwrites the average.
Exactly. And she intuitively understood this. By specifically referencing his ultimate idol as her chosen partner, she engineered a flawless ending to their story.
Oh, wow. She softened the blow by aligning her new husband with someone the author already worshipped.
Exactly.
Essentially said, I'm not leaving you for a lesser man, I'm leaving you for the king.
Yes. She proved she had listened to him over those 3 years. She remembered his passions, and she drew a firm, uncrossable boundary.
The socioeconomic one.
Right. She was saying, I belong to this gritty working class world of Yazawa, and you belong to the elite academic world of the Aiken test. She ended the relationship gracefully, surgically, before the messy reality of their differing socioeconomic lives could corrupt their affection.
She recognized the expiration date and curated the ending.
She did.
And the most incredible part of this story happens 50 years later. The author, now in his 60s, takes all of his journal entries, all of his hyper detailed memories of this 3-year period, and feeds them into an AI to get an objective analysis.
And the AI confirms it.
It does. She actually loved him deeply. The feelings were entirely mutual. But she broke it off, using Yazawa as an impenetrable shield, specifically to protect his academic future from being derailed by her working class reality. She stepped aside so he could fly.
It is an act of breathtaking, tragic heroism. But more importantly for our listeners' question, it demonstrates how the author's eccentricity, his obsessive high-definition memory, works in his favor.
How so?
Because of his archival mind, he didn't remember her as a girl who rejected him. He monumentalized her. He captured every detail of her grace and preserved it.
And women love being remembered.
Absolutely. Women possess a highly attuned radar for being truly deeply observed. The author doesn't just date women. He curates their memory with the reverence of a museum director.
He makes them immortal in his mind.
Exactly.
And that leads us perfectly into the next major romantic case study, which happens years later in his corporate life. This is the 3-second love story, and it is the ultimate proof of how his bizarre baggage translates into intoxicating charm.
It is a fascinating display of repetition compulsion. He finds himself in almost the exact same dynamic as the clinic nurse, but with the roles slightly shifted.
Yes, he is now a young corporate professional, and he develops an intense magnetic chemistry with an older female coworker.
Right.
She is vibrant, popular, and she has a boyfriend who works in a completely different department. But the chemistry between her and the author is undeniable. They are secretly practicing dance steps she learned in college in the empty office hallways.
Just picture that. The fluorescent lights, the thrill of a secret, the physical synchronization of dancing without actually crossing the line into touching.
The physical and emotional gap between them is closing rapidly.
The entire office ecosystem can feel it.
Exactly. The younger staff are all gossiping about them. The air is thick with tension. And then the inciting incident happens.
The boyfriend gets transferred.
Yes, to
Yeah.
a branch far away. The geographical barrier is gone. One day, the coworker stops the author in the hallway. She brings up the office gossip, completely stripping away all the pretense and the plausible deniability of their dancing.
They stop.
They stop, they lock eyes. And the author writes that for exactly 3 seconds, they held unbroken, heavy eye contact. He notes that in those 3 seconds, time dilated. The air was electric. They completely, silently, and without any ambiguity acknowledged that they were in desperate mutual love.
A profound moment of total emotional honesty. The masks were entirely off.
But then, breaking the silence, showing an immense amount of restraint, the author softly says, "We're just a rumor, right? Because you have a boyfriend."
Wow.
He notes that she looks sad but deeply relieved, and they walked away. The affair never happens. Now, I have to push back hard on this.
Let's hear it.
When I read this, my immediate thought was, this isn't romance, this is cowardice. Wasn't he just chickening out? I mean, he had the geographical advantage since the boyfriend was transferred. They both knew they loved each other. Was he just terrified of an HR nightmare?
You're wondering if he was afraid of the messy reality of an office breakup.
Exactly. Is this really noble restraint? Or is this just a guy terrified of the consequences hiding behind poetic language?
That is an incredibly valid critique, and it's the exact conclusion you would draw if you view romance purely through the lens of acquisition.
Acquisition.
Right. Modern romance is obsessed with possession. The idea that if you love something, you must acquire it, secure it, and integrate it into your daily life.
Naturally.
But to understand the author's charm, you have to undergo a profound paradigm shift. You have to view this not through the lens of a conqueror, but through the lens of a romantic archivist.
Okay, lay out the archivist's philosophy for me.
To an archivist, preservation is vastly more important than possession. Think about what happens if he ignores the boyfriend and steals her away. What is the reality of that acquisition?
They start dating.
Right, but their pure, crystalline electric connection instantly begins to degrade. It decays into mundane office gossip and HR meetings.
Oh, I see.
It degrades into awkward encounters at the water cooler, fighting with her ex-boyfriend's friends, arguing over who is going to wash the dirty dishes in a cramped apartment. The poetry of the hallway dance inevitably becomes the prosaic reality of a standard relationship.
It becomes normal, and normal is messy.
Exactly. So by stopping it at the absolute apex of the tension, he freezes it.
Wow. By stepping back in that exact 3-second window, he sacrificed the physical relationship to preserve the absolute perfection of unconsummated mutual desire forever.
Yes, never had a chance to decay.
Yeah.
He chose the amber over the reality.
He chose to keep the masterpiece in the vault rather than hang it in a sunny room where it would fade. That's incredibly poignant.
It is. And to directly answer the listener's prompt about why women find him charming, to a woman, being understood that deeply is rare.
Extremely rare.
Having a man look into your eyes, recognize the sheer magnitude of the connection, but also recognize the chaos that pursuing it would cause in your life, is the highest form of romantic validation.
He treats a woman's emotional landscape with the ultimate respect.
He validates her existence by never ever forgetting the profoundness of their connection, but he steps back when stepping forward would cause her pain.
That extreme restraint, fueled by his obsessive need to keep the memory pristine, is deeply, deeply intoxicating. He doesn't conquer women, he immortalizes them.
Exactly.
That completely flips my idea of cowardice on its head. He's weaponizing his inability to forget in order to create perfect, untarnished romantic narratives. It's almost literary.
It's very literary.
But this intense observation, this archiving of the human experience, well, it doesn't just apply to romance. It dictates how he charms absolutely everyone, which is the final piece of the listener's prompt. You ask why he is beloved by people across massive generational age gaps.
And the answer to that lies in his unique ability to validate invisible competence.
I want to illustrate this with the cafeteria cashier game. It is a seemingly mundane anecdote from his corporate logs, but it is my absolute favorite story in the entire collection.
Oh, it's a great one because it perfectly illustrates his daily microscopic application of empathy.
Picture the scene. The author is at his corporate office eating in the massive company cafeteria. It is rush hour. It's a chaotic, noisy blur of hungry, stressed salarymen trying to get food and get back to their desks.
A very stressful environment.
In the middle of this chaos is an older woman working the cash register. Now, most people don't even look at her. To the average salaryman, she is just an NPC.
Right, a non-playable character.
Exactly. She is just a piece of the cafeteria machinery.
Completely invisible role in the corporate hierarchy.
But because of his obsessive attention to detail, because his brain cannot help but process everything in high definition, the author starts really watching her. And he notices something incredible.
She's hyper competent.
Yes. He notices that she isn't just ringing up the tray immediately in front of her. While she's taking money from the first person, she is craning her neck, looking 3 trays deep into the line, identifying the food, doing complex mental math for multiple combinations simultaneously,
Which is incredibly hard to do.
and preparing the exact change in her palm before the customer even reaches for their wallet.
She isn't just doing a job, she is operating as a cognitive savant. The mental RAM required to process that much dynamic information in a loud room is staggering.
Right. Most people see a tired lunch lady. He sees a grandmaster playing speed chess, so he decides to test her. He builds a silent game just for the two of them.
I love this part.
One afternoon, his specific lunch combination costs exactly 470 yen. He gets to the front of the line. Now, normally, a customer would hand her a 1,000 yen bill or try to find exact change. but he wants to see if he can break her rhythm.
He wants to throw a 100-mile-per-hour curveball to a major league hitter.
Exactly. So he purposefully fumbles his wallet, acts a bit confused to draw her attention, and then suddenly slaps down exactly one 500 yen coin.
A disruption to the expected sequence.
Yeah.
And how does she react to the curveball?
In a millisecond, the exact moment the 500 yen coin hits the register tray, she reaches out and instantly drops exactly three 10 yen coins into his open hand.
She was ready for it.
She had the 30 yen chained ready the entire time, completely anticipating his move. And as she drops the coins, the transaction stops being invisible. She makes eye contact, realizes he was intentionally testing her skills, leans in and whispers, "Zurui."
Which translates roughly to "you're sneaky" or
Yeah.
"that's cheating."
Exactly. And they share this huge, conspiratorial, joyful smile in the middle of this chaotic rush hour. They share a moment of complete mutual recognition.
What's fascinating here is the sheer transformative power of being truly seen.
Yes.
By building this specific silent game, he let an invisible service worker know that he recognized her elite mastery. He didn't just give her a polite thank you.
He engaged with her at the level of her specific genius.
Exactly. He forced her to use her skills and then celebrated her victory.
He makes people feel like masterminds.
And that is precisely why older people love him. He refuses to interact with the stereotype of older woman at a register.
He interacts with the specific, highly competent, brilliant individual in front of him.
He applies the same archival focus to her that he applied to the clinic nurse's hair or the 35-year manga quest. He validates their existence.
And he applies this exact same intensely empathetic observation to the younger generation, too. Let's talk about his concept of being a swallower. The Japanese term he uses in his logs is nomikuito.
Nomikuito, someone who literally swallows things down. This concept is crucial to understanding both his corporate survival and his family life.
Because we have to remember the foundation of his psychology. He remembers the trauma of his father stealing his voice with the bottle cap essay. He remembers the public humiliation.
He also writes about the erratic, unpredictable rage of his mother.
Right. Because his brain archived that pain with photographic clarity, he made an ironclad, lifelong rule for himself. He is a swallower of negative emotions.
If he has a disastrous day at work, if a boss screams at him, if a client humiliates him, he physically and emotionally swallows the rage.
He absolutely refuses to bring the toxicity of the corporate world into the sanctuary of his home.
He acts as a human shock absorber for his family. He internalizes the kinetic energy of the outside world's damage so that his wife and children never have to feel the impact.
And we know definitively that this wasn't just a goal. He actually achieved it because of the note.
Oh, the son's note.
He writes that when his son finally grew up and moved out of the house, his son left a note for his parents. The note didn't talk about vacations or toys. The note simply said, "Thank you for never bringing the bad things from the outside world into our home."
Which is an incredible, almost unbelievable testament to his emotional discipline. To absorb decades of corporate stress and never let it leak into the dining room requires a Herculean effort.
It really does. But he doesn't just protect his family, he protects his younger colleagues as well.
Right, he uses his obsessive memory of being mistreated and overlooked to reverse engineer his own mentorship style.
He talks about utilizing the educational theory of ZPD, the zone of proximal development.
Yes, Lev Vygotsky's theory.
Can you explain that a bit?
For our listeners who might not be familiar with educational psychology, the zone of proximal development is essentially the cognitive gap between what a learner can achieve independently and what they can achieve with guidance from a skilled partner.
Okay.
Vygotsky argued that the most effective learning happens in this exact zone through a process called scaffolding.
Explain scaffolding in the context of the corporate office. How does the author use it?
Imagine building a skyscraper. You need scaffolding to support the workers as they build the load-bearing walls.
Naturally.
Once the walls are strong enough to stand on their own, you remove this scaffolding. When the author identifies a rising star in his office, a young employee with raw talent but messy execution, he becomes their scaffold.
He doesn't just do the work for them, right?
No. And he doesn't micromanage them like his father did to him.
Yeah.
He sits with them, helps them refine their logic, guides their presentations, and builds their confidence. He provides the exact structural support they need to reach a new level of professional competence.
But the most critical part of scaffolding, as you said, is knowing exactly when to take it down.
Which requires an immense, almost painful erasure of the ego.
And this is where he shines. The second the project succeeds, the second the young employee finishes the presentation, and the senior executives in the boardroom start clapping, the author completely erases his own ego.
He just fades out.
He steps backward into the shadows and lets the young employee take 100% of the credit. Now, he's honest in his essays. He openly admits that sometimes, as a human being, he feels a sharp, bitter twinge of jealousy watching a 25-year-old get a standing ovation for a brilliant strategy that he spent weeks helping them design.
It is entirely natural to want the applause. We all do.
But his ethical framework, which was born directly from his archived trauma of older colleagues and parents stealing his credit when he was young, kicks in.
He forces himself to be a Nomikuto.
He swallows the jealousy. He absolutely refuses to inflict his past pain on the next generation.
If we synthesize all of this, this is the ultimate beauty of his eccentricity. He takes the heavy, exhausting, bizarre baggage of his photographic memory, the 60-year hurts, the childhood humiliation, the pain of unfulfilled romance, and instead of letting it make him bitter, he grinds it down into a highly specialized lens.
A lens for empathy.
Exactly. Through that lens, he can see other people's pain, their hidden genius, and their potential more clearly than anyone else. His baggage isn't an anchor. It is the high-octane fuel for his empathy.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring this home and directly address you, the listener, who sent us this magnificent, confusing, beautiful stack of source material.
You asked us if this author is perceived as a weirdo or an eccentric, and how that translates to charm.
The answer is an unequivocal yes. He is undeniably an eccentric.
100%. His mind is a labyrinthine vault of 60-year grudges, obsessive aesthetics, 35-year manga hunts, and a fierce refusal to use standard grandparent names.
But the friction of those exact contradictions is the exact source of his intoxicating charm.
That's the secret.
He presents a tough, unyielding, leather jacket exterior that serves only to protect a deeply romantic, tender archivist who will melt into a puddle at the sight of a newborn baby.
He tickles women's hearts not through grand, empty cinematic gestures, but because he pays microscopic, archivist-level attention to the details of their existence.
He remembers the lighting, the unspoken hesitations, the specific angle of the sun, and he preserves them flawlessly. He makes the women who cross his path feel like the revered, immortal protagonists of a classic film.
And he connects with older and younger generations because he absolutely refuses to interact with stereotypes.
Right. He plays complex math games with lunch ladies to validate their hidden genius, and he swallows his own ego to let young employees shine. He is intensely, unapologetically himself in a world that constantly demands conformity.
Before we wrap up, though, I know you wanted to offer one last, highly practical tactic pulled straight from the author's playbook.
I do. We've spent this whole time talking about words, memory, and action, but the author utilizes a phenomenon rooted in cognitive science regarding the absence of words.
The silence is more tactic.
Yes. Neurologically, human beings are terrified of a vacuum of sound. When a conversation pauses, our anxiety spikes, and we rush to fill the void with chatter.
We can't stand dead air.
We really can't.
So,
But the author realizes that the auditory cortex processes the sudden absence of sound not as empty space, but as a distinct, heavy, tangible signal. So the next time you are in a high-stakes negotiation or a tense conversation with a partner or a difficult meeting and there is a pause, do not frantically search your brain for words to fill the gap.
do not relieve the tension. Intentionally hold the heavy, tangible silence.
Let it echo. By holding the silence, you alter the flow of time in the room. You project absolute confidence.
You make the other person wait for your next move.
You completely control the space without uttering a single syllable, just like the author did in those 3 electric seconds in the hallway with his coworker.
It is the ultimate move of a master to control the room, not just with the music of the language, but with the heavy, powerful pauses between the notes.
Which brings us to the provocative final thought we want to leave you with today. Something to really mull over as you go about your week.
We live in an era of digital amnesia. We outsource our memories to our smartphones.
We let servers remember our photos, our schedules, our relationships, and alongside that, the wellness industry constantly tells us to let go of our baggage, to smooth out our rough edges so we can be frictionless and easy to deal with.
We're conditioned to believe that holding on to things makes us sick.
But looking at the incredibly rich, profoundly connected, deeply impactful life of this author, what if our modern obsession with letting go is actually making us less human?
It's a great question.
What if, in an age where everything is disposable and forgotten in a newsfeed, Your absolute refusal to let go of a childhood slight is the exact mechanism that gives you your fierce, unwavering sense of justice today.
What if your bizarre obsession with a specific song lyric, or the stitching on a pair of shoes, or a 30-second anime clip is the exact thing that makes you distinct and utterly fascinating to the people who take the time to know you?
What if your baggage isn't weighing you down? What if it is the anchor that keeps you tethered to your authentic self?
Exactly. What if the things you are desperately trying to hide or fix are the exact things people are actually looking for?
This author proves that the most beautiful, structurally sound, deeply charming lives aren't drawn in the clean, erasable lines of a normal person. They are drawn in the messy, contradictory, permanent ink of our heaviest memories and our strangest obsessions. Your baggage is your blueprint.
Well said.
Thank you so much for providing the keys to such a magnificent psychological vault and for letting us explore it with you. Keep exploring those murky, beautiful waters of human connection. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.